How do you
Hmm.
decide what's important for you and what you will think about in this complex world? How do
Wow.
you make that decision?
Wow. Yeah, that's a very deep and relevant question. I like to do is as much as possible. How bold can this decision be? Not afraid
Mm.
sometimes to go where.
As much as your security is important, your safety, the safety of and to guard your mind and what you let in and what you choose to spend your time with and on, I believe it's extremely important that a lot of emphasis and safety mechanisms are placed to protect your mind.
Yes.
Burglar bar, alarm
Yes.
system, um, all of that is placed on your mind. A security system is there to govern what goes in and what comes out. And most important, what stays. And on this show, we examine and metal test what stays in. We ask questions and seek to investigate, is it that what is in our minds ought to be there? Should it be there? Should we unlearn it and relearn something else? Should we delete it completely, unlearn it completely, and rethink our processes?
Hmm.
Big questions, questions that we'll probably never answer. And I hope we don't, because the moment we answer those questions, then we are done
Yes.
learning. How do you feel about that, Dr. P?
Very, very profound, Jamie. The moment we feel that we have done learning. And I was just reflecting that, in the Bible, there are 134 verses about God in
Mm,
your heart. When the Bible talks about the heart, it's referring to the mind. And one of the key verses which keep popping up is Proverbs chapter 4, I think is verse 23, which says, keep thine heart with all diligence, or guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. So it's a place where we process
mm,
things, the heart, and out of it comes. So as you rightly said, the inputs, the ingredients that we put in are important because they determine what comes out of it. So as you rightly said, what we feed in, we have to sift and filter negative energies and negative thoughts as much as possible. Because what we process is what will come out.
indeed. Um, the issues of life, as
Mm.
mentioned in the Bible verse, what comes out of it comes the issues of life. If we are not deliberate about living, then we will be like a trough in blown and dragged by the wind. Just like
Yes.
a paper in the wind. Wherever the wind takes us, that's where we'll go. And sometimes, um, you know, if we allow the mind to go, it can go to exciting places. But
Yes.
if it is that we don't develop and harness what is within the mind, because what goes in sort of determines what is there, but also how we develop what is there, how we work on what is there, and also filters what comes out. So, I mean, the process is sort of a continuous loop. In, process, out, in, process, out. Um, but a part of that loop that we probably pay less attention to is what is deleted, right? What is sort of changed inside the mind. What
Mm.
the connections that are made, the neural links that are formed, and one of the major ones that we find important is decision. And at
Yes.
some point in time, you just mentioned the word. You will have to decide. How do you
Mm.
decide what's important for you and what you will think about in this complex world? How do
Wow.
you make that decision?
Wow. Yeah, that's a very deep and relevant question. How do you decide? And decisions, we have to think, because many things actually, many times we battle with fear. We battle with insufficiencies, insecurities. We battle with failures. We have so many different stimulants coming at us that's affecting our decision making process. That if we are not deliberate about it, what you're saying, Jamie, we have to be deliberate about our decision making processes, because many times decisions can be made just strictly out of emotions.
When you're making a decision, what's a fear that you have? What are one of the fear that sort of acts as a part of the complex process that you have in making your decisions?
Well, again, the dimensions from which decisions are made is very important, because I like to bring as much as possible my decision making process in the realm of being creative, in the realm of not being afraid to change, in the realm sometimes of being disruptive. So my decision making process are not constrained. I try to bring it beyond what we perceive as limits, because many times what we see as limits, they are our biggest opportunities to move beyond them. So we tend to minimize this space in which we operate, because fear can drive us in that realm. So the first thing I like to do is, as much as possible, how bold can this decision be? Not afraid sometimes to go where, it's not the norm. I like to make decisions in those realms. In other words, sometimes we win and sometimes we learn.
Right.
Not fearful of failure.
I'm sort of listening and learning from you. So it's a question. You have a decision to make, a complex decision in an uncertain world. So you're faced with uncertainty and you have complexity to deal with. And the first thing you do is ask yourself a question. How bold can this decision be? Or at least that's a part of your process. How do you define the boldness? Double click on that for me. Let's dive a little bit deeper into how bold a decision can be. How do you think about boldness in that respect?
Boldness, yes. How can my decision that I'm going to make change things tremendously? Not just for me, but even disrupt the environment in which I'm in. I'm not afraid to enter those spaces. So it's how do I take the limits off? The first thing I like to do is to find out what are the limitations that would constrain my decision. What are those constraints? And I like to how to rethink, unlearn, those limits. I like to challenge where the fears are. Why? The question why? Why haven't others thought of this? Why not try something different? Because as you said, complexity is not linear. Because we tend to sometimes bring a linear approach to a complex situation. 1 + 1 does not equal 2. Complexity. We're not managing inputs, but we are trying to maximize outputs. And if we are output focused, in other words, there's no special formula for the input to get the output that we want. But many times is that sizzle that we bring to making that steak. Don't be afraid to be unique.
And you think of boldness in a way where it's about disruptiveness and impact to the environment. And the second thing you ask yourself is another question, right? Is what are the limitations and constraints? So we're seeing how, and now we're at what. So we're hitting at something here. I'm picking up a trend. How and what are the limitations and constraints that are already existing, right? How do you find out? What's your investigative process now that you kind of go into to find out the what are the limitations, the what question?
Yes, the what questions. It's
Let's try to use an example. Let's use CMU, right? When you arrived at CMU, and you took a very bold perspective. I was there, I remember. And the vision of getting it from CMI to CMU in a few years, and to scale it rapidly. It was the industry was calling for that. How did you find out the limitations of that are currently existing within that market space? What was your thought process?
yes, the first thing, looking through the lens of opportunities. It was easy to see the limitations of what existed in academia, in education. People are hung up on qualifications. People are hung up on what you don't have, that you miss the opportunities of what you could be, what you could become. So if you look within the realm of what you have to produce, you'll never achieve excellence or greatness. You have to go beyond and look outside of resources. Let resources follow you, and you don't follow resources. You make your decisions beyond your resources, because the big, bold decision, the big, bold visions will attract resources. I've never seen vision following resources, but resources following vision. People like to win. And as long as you have to create it. It have to start in your mind, that you can see something that is not there before you can convince others to see it. And be prepared that 90% of the people come on will not see it and will challenge you why it can't be there. Use a 10% resource to change that situation. So it's a mind game. It's a chess game. That's what life is. So you have to decide what output you want and allow timing to create moves for you. You don't know, but you believe that you can do it.
Thank Fritz for being with us, and thank you for joining the Unlearn Show. I hope that you created a new memory. Join us next week as we seek to unlearn, to rethink, to undefine, and to create a new memory. We hope that you were inspired. Thanks for joining.